You're on.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the work session. Today is Monday, June 24th, 2024. It's approximately 1 p.m. I am Mayor Eric Enriquez. We will start with a moment of silence for the brave men and women of the United States Armed Forces as they protect our interests around the globe, as well as the courageous men and women of the Las Cruces Police Department and Las Cruces Fire Department as they keep our city safe 24/7, 365. If you join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the states of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll go ahead and start with Jobs of the Week. We have Sarah Rainey. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much. All right, my name is Sarah Rainey. I am the one-stop coordinator for the Southwest region of the New Mexico Connections. We are, for the Jobs of the Week, sorry, I'm running crazy today. There's a lot going on. We have Assistant Director for the Human Resources for the City of Las Cruces. That position starts at $89,000. It is a continuous posting at this time. We also have the Water Conservation Specialist for the City of Las Cruces. It begins at $17.40 an hour, and the posting closes on July 1st. We went ahead and left up the Digital Content Specialist for the Animal Services Center of Mesilla Valley. That position starts at $24.78 an hour, and it is a continuous posting right now. We have an administrative specialist for the Interagency Readiness Solutions out at White Sands Missile Range. That position starts at $47,000 a year. The posting closes on the 13th of July. We also have a lead custodian at the night shift at Wismer through Tresco. So for that position, you have to apply through the Tresco job description. It starts at $17.45 an hour and closes on July 14th. We have a diesel technician, advanced diesel services here in Las Cruces. That position starts at $17 an hour and the posting closes on the 13th. As always, just a reminder, we are still open until 6 p.m. for anybody that needs to come in for any services, or if it just takes a little longer to get everything situated in the office, or if you need to talk to somebody to help with all of job readiness skills. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Next, we have Pets of the Week. Amy DeFelix.
Hello, everyone. Of course, my name is Amy DeFelix. I'm one of the rescue coordinators for the Animal Services Center of the Mesilla Valley. And I always pick and present the Pets of the Week. We always start off with our Cat of the Week. This week, she is Lapis. Her number is 76379. And she says, I have a gentle soul and a heart full of love to give. I'm always on the hunt for new adventure, whether it's a game of chase the string or a quiet moment watching the world go by. I'm sweet, never one to pass up a good cuddle session. I've been told my purrs are the best lullabies, but what I long for most is a forever home, a place where I can share my love and curiosity. And then we also have a Dog of the Week. This week she is Baby. Her number is 66477, and she says, my days are mostly peaceful and quiet. I've always been a mellow soul, content with a soft bed and a gentle pat. I'm not one for too much fuss or excitement. I've got an independent streak a mile wide. I don't need constant attention, but I do appreciate a kind word and a gentle touch. I'm a senior, you see, with a lifetime of wisdom under my collar. I'm just looking for a peaceful home where I can spend my golden years. And then regarding events, we do have, it's an on-site adoption event. It's Picnic with a Pup at the Animal Services Center this Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. It'll be at our adoption and intake facility, so the address is 3543 Baton Memorial West. We'll have some of our longest term dogs, picnic blankets, tables, we'll have music and food, and we encourage everyone to stop by. If you can't adopt, we highly encourage you guys to foster, get to meet our longest term dogs, and hopefully we can either get them into forever homes or at least foster homes. And then we also have an offsite adoption event on Sunday, also from 11 to 2, and in case you need that address, that is 3050 East Loman. And then of course, for all of June, we have our Bring Love Home Adoption Special, so all adoptions are free. Counting up the tally of the adoptions, we now have 158 dogs that have been adopted so far, 158 dogs and cats, excuse me, that have adopted so far, and that does include, there are 24 animals that have been adopted over the weekend that are currently getting surgery, so they'll be officially adopted today, but they've been adopted over the weekend as well. And so for this time last year, we've only had 114 adoptions, that's including close of business last 24th, so we're definitely doing a lot more adoptions than we did last year, and we're hoping this trend continues to increase. And then we have our website, our internet links. Our general website is ascmv.org, and we're all over social media. We have Facebook, Instagram, TikTok is where we post a lot of what's going on and highlights, some like animal highlights and kind of events that are going to be going on. And then YouTube and Spotify and Apple Podcasts is where we upload episodes of our Tales from the Paw Side podcast. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Next, we'll start with the agenda items, 3.1, New Mexico legislative policies, and we have Barbara Bencomo.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Yes, this afternoon, we're back to talk about New Mexico legislative policy. We presented an update for you all on April 8th of the 2024 legislative session. That included both policy information as well as our capital outlay requests that had been granted to us. After that meeting, we had feedback that the council wanted to talk about more legislative policy items. And so we had meetings over a couple of days with each one of you. And so the content of that meeting, of those meetings, will be brought forward today, along with additional information by our lobbyist, Larry Horan. So that's where we are today, the policy discussion on June 24th. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our lobbyist, Larry Horan.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Larry Horan, lobbyist for the city of Las Cruces. It's good to be back here in front of you again. Barbara gave a good summation about why we're here and what we did about a month ago to get your individual perspectives on legislative policy issues that you'd either like to see addressed or like to discuss. A big part of the focus, because of the announcement of a possible special session by the governor that still has an announced date of July 18th for a special session to deal with primarily the four things that you see listed here, which is criminal competency, potential amendments to the Assisted Outpatient Treatment Act and statute for essentially civil commitment for noncompliance with treatment, felon in possession of a firearm, and then also a possible statutory change for a panhandling or an obstruction of traffic statute. Since we met about a month ago, as of right now, the plan is still for a special session to be called on July 18th, although both caucuses of the House of Representatives and the Senate of the majority, which were the Democrat caucuses, met about a week to 10 days ago. The appetite amongst the legislators is they're not too excited about going into special session. They don't have agreement yet on any of the possible legislation, so things could still change over the next month as to even whether or not there's going to be a special session on these topics. Although, and we'll get to it on some of the other slides, but the City of Las Cruces participated in the Interim Courts of Corrections and Justice Committee presentation earlier in June, right after we had our meetings, to talk about these issues. The Courts and Corrections Committee is meeting again this week And they have a 2-day meeting, and it's focused again primarily on those topics of criminal competency, the behavioral health changes to the AOT. They're talking about the Assisted Outpatient Treatment Act and implementation in Bernalillo County and why that did not work. And also they're looking at the potential First Amendment issues as it relates, looks like it will be with the, for a panhandling statutory change. And so the legislators are still very focused and very active addressing the issues that was primarily what we focused and what we talked about in our individual meetings. Just as a reminder, the 2025 legislative session will be a 60-day legislative session. All the members of the legislature will have had faced elections this November. The primary actually produced some pretty significant changes for the makeup of the legislature, so we're going to have a lot of new faces. Regardless of what happens with a special session in July, I would anticipate that a lot of the focus in the 60-day session is going to be these same issues. It's going to be the criminal justice reform, public safety, competence, and civil commitment. Because even if they make some progress on these issues in a special session, it'll be back in the 60 days. So it's timely, it's pertinent, and it's something we're going to be dealing with probably for the next several years. It's probably not even going to be limited to the 2025 legislative session. So a few things that came up in our individual meetings, and I'll start with this as a first. This is a decision or an idea or a direction for actual looking for a statutory change, which is what we would be asking for. In 2022, there was a joint resolution passed and went to the voters to expand the anti-donation clause in the Constitution, Article 9, Section 14. And what that expansion, which did pass and was successful, is it allows now for essential services for residential purposes or infrastructure, which includes water, wastewater, energy, internet, and other similar services. It allows the legislature to pass enabling legislation to create further exemptions to the anti-donation clause. So for the city of Las Cruces, where that came up, and it came up in our council meetings, is the septic system issue that we're dealing with. So as of today, because of Article 9, Section 14 of the Constitution, we can build a sewer line up to the property line of a property owner. We cannot make that final connection from property line to the house because that's private property. We're not allowed to do that because of the anti-donation. So the way it would work is if the direction is that we want to explore a program to set up a system to allow for connection to sewers for residents, we would need to pass enabling legislation in the 2025 session, so we'd have to introduce a bill that would allow for the local government to adopt a program of whatever that definition is. If it's limited to septic, if it's water, wastewater, to allow a program to make that connection on the actual individual property. It would be the first piece of legislation passed under this, this new section of the Constitution because it just passed in the last general election. So if that's something that the city is interested in, that is something we could pursue throughout this interim to have discussions with legislators, and then also it would be something we would have to introduce and pass legislation in the coming 2025 legislative session. And besides that specific policy issue, the rest of our discussions focused on the competency, criminal competency, mental health competency, and also what the city of Las Cruces is doing and is successful in implementing as it relates to the crime issue, unhoused homelessness, and the services we have, and then also trying to identify gaps in those services that we think the legislature might be able to help us with. We also talked about a proposal to the administration and the legislature about a potential pilot project in the city of Las Cruces, bridging the gap between public safety, the services we have, particularly at the Community of Hope, how we're dealing with the homeless issue and also with the competency and criminal competency in particular. And Chief Story and Chief Smith made a presentation to the legislature right after we had our meetings early in June. And we have a lot of data and we have a lot of success stories here with the city of Las Cruces and what we're doing. And there's a possibility that we're pitching with the administration about a pilot project to implement and expand some of those services at the state level. And I'll pause there. You were there in the meetings. We had these discussions, and so I would open it up for discussions or any questions.
Mayor.
Thank you, Larry. Councilor Matisse?
Larry, maybe you or David, I have septic tanks being installed, quite a lot, good number of them over on Solopec. Would this bill help actually pay some of the cost that these neighbors are now having to pay today?
Mayor and Councilor Matisse, that's exactly what it would do. As we're going through, and I think we've been working on the septic issue since about 2008, 2009, installing the sewer lines for those who have septics, it would allow you to adopt a program to help a homeowner either, you could use public dollars to pay all or a portion of that last, it's not last mile, but that last step between property line and the house. That's exactly what it would do.
Councilor Flores?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much, Larry. I'm glad to hear that there's some movement on the exemptions to the Article 9, Section 14, the anti-donation. One of the exceptions is health. So the part I don't understand is and there's wastewater, why can't the hookups from the curb to the home, to the house, why wouldn't that qualify? I think we've had this discussion, but I think it'd be good for the public to know. It seems to me it's a health issue. And besides that, it's, when it goes under, I know that for utilities and other things, leaks and all that sort of stuff, if it generates under the home, it's on the homeowner. So it's probably consistent with that line of reasoning, which I really don't support at all. Even leaks under the house. I mean, anyway. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about antiseptic tanks or removing them. And it has to be a health issue. Has that ever been presented to the legislators? I know I haven't brought that. Oh, I did bring it up with, I met with Senator Hamblin and Senator Souls on Saturday. And we had that discussion. And because of something, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but Senator Souls was the one who was, he was instrumental in getting the hookups in Hacienda Acres. Some, not all. So people, at the time, it wasn't my district, above Highway 70, didn't get that. And I don't understand. Anyway, so what was the reason Senator Souls was able to get that money for the hookup from the curb to the house? Are you familiar with that?
Mayor and Councilor Flores, I am not. One possibility would be is if it wasn't state dollars, if it was federal money, then it's a different rule as to what would apply, and so anti-donation would not apply to federal funds. So if he was able to obtain federal funds and they had a similar program. As it relates to health, it's hard to answer exactly without the language on the health exemption in front of me, but my recollection is that's more focused on provision of health care like Medicaid to allow for that. So I've just never heard or seen an interpretation that would consider something like sewer or septic or water as a public health issue. It's a possibility that they could explore, but now we have a clear exemption that we can utilize to make sure that you can adopt that type of program.
Thank you. And I'll read up on the new language and talk to you about it. Thank you so much, Larry, Mr. Huron. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Thanks so much, Larry, for meeting with us and the work on behalf of the city. I think for me, it would be really important that we try to engage with one of our local legislators around doing language on the anti-donation piece specifically for these hookups. Obviously, definitely meet with our incredible LCU Utilities Director, Adrian Widmer, who will have more information on the kind of work we've been able to do with the ARPA dollars that we got that obviously were not bound by anti-donation, but I think, we've already started that really good work and would love to continue it. There's a lot more, especially for low to moderate income households. And so I think this is a really important issue to try to tackle and try to get, I would additionally say funding for not just the legislation, but also get the state to commit some funding to that. So that would be my suggestion. On the issue of funding, though, I think additionally, as we head into potentially this special session, or even if these topics that you raised that might be discussed at the special session, if it doesn't end up happening for whatever reason and they get discussed in 2025, I think it's really important for us to make a really strong and firm stand on no mandates without funding. I think, cities are stretched, and legislators keep talking about historic revenues, and so I think it's, I don't want to say put up or shut up, but I do want to say that I think these mandates are incredibly important, but they would also be incredibly stressful for the city, for municipalities, and so I think it's really important that we have a really firm ground on no mandates without funding from the state. And then, Larry, one of the things that I failed to discuss with you was around the initiative that we have around NAP properties, nuisance abatement properties, that we're really trying to address with our community development department, with fire, with PD, with codes. We have this great team working to address these abandoned nuisance properties. And I talked to our federal lobbyists who said there used to be federal funding for these kinds of projects. In fact, the city of Detroit used it and they demolished like 40,000 abandoned properties or something crazy, but that ended in 2021. And so I would love it if we, worked with the state to try to do some sort of either pilot project or some sort of project to address abandoned and now nuisance properties that have become vacant and dangerous to our community. Other than that, I don't have any questions. Thank you for your update, and I'm sure you'll continue to keep us updated on the status of the special session. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Councilor Grant?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Larry. And I just want to kind of bring out publicly, and I think you've already alluded to it, but I felt a little pessimistic when we first sat down, when we're kind of talking about what is really possible with the special session, what's the appetite for that. And I do want to reiterate, or have you reiterate, that if these things do not happen during the special session, that does not mean that they are being put aside or put to bed. So I think that there's a lot of public support for this special session, especially on competency and other public safety. So can you just reassure all of us again that even if it doesn't roll during the special session, all is not lost?
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor Graham. Absolutely, and I'll give a little more color just about the structure of a special session because it might help a little bit with that. So a special session has to be called by the governor. The governor can call a special session for up to 30 days at a time. So that's the limitation. And legislators typically are somewhat reluctant to go into a special session, as is an administration, if you do not have agreement coming into a special session. Because when you have a special, the cost is about $50,000 a day. There's limited topics, and the topics are limited by what the governor puts in the proclamation for a special session. So if it's not in the proclamation, they can't consider any other topic. So really what's important is that you have an agreement before you come in. Because if it's going to drag on for 30 days, there's nothing else that they're really considering. They're not going to get a lot of, you won't make a lot of progress towards the changes you're trying to affect because that's all they can consider. They usually come in with an idea of what they think they can and cannot pass. And what I will say, and we talked about this in our discussion, just the AOT, or the Assisted Outpatient Treatment Program, that is on the books and is in statute, which was carried by Senator Papin at the time, that took 5 or 6 years to pass the statute. Because when you're dealing with things like competency, both whether it's criminal competency or civil commitment competency issues, there's a lot of interested stakeholders who have legitimate concerns, and there's also a lot of issues as it relates to mandating treatment, forcing treatment, whether or not you can detain somebody against their will, and so it's a really heavy topic. So all of these things, all the four that we're talking about, competency, civil competency, criminal, felon in possession, and then also a panhandling or similar ordinance, they're big issues. So that's why I say, I'm looking into those. Yes, we're going to deal with them in special session, but this is a probably 3 or 4 year outlook on we're going to be dealing with these issues. And so even if it's not in the special, I can't guarantee a lot with the legislature, but I can almost guarantee that these will be back.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, Councilor McClure.
Hi, Larry. Thank you for keeping us updated. Since we last spoke, I had some questions about every time I would talk to either community development or housing, it was a lot of the state won't let us do that. We can't build fast, we can't build efficient. So I'm wondering if there might be an outlook toward more bills that are going to let us build ADUs a little bit faster, things like that, that kind of aligns with what our zoning might be looking like in the next year or so. If you have any sort of guidance on that, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilor McClure. We were actually just having that conversation right before we started about some of those housing issues. So I don't have anything specific for you, but yes, I think that the appetite and the ability is there for us to look at those type of issues to help streamline, speed up the process for that construction. But also there's potential that I'm hearing and have been contacted about a statewide zoning statute, which may not be something we would be interested in because then it would preempt local governments from adopting their own zoning. And so we have to be careful with what's proposed because some of it may be an issue that we want to maintain local control, but also there are things at the state, particularly Construction Industries Division and other, maybe MFA, who can help us streamline those statutes. So I think we're in very preliminary stages. Natalie and I, we were just talking about it, so I think that's something we absolutely can explore. So maybe next time in front of you, we can have a little bit more meat on that bone.
All right, thank you. Good. All right. Now, again, thank you, Larry. Thanks for updating us and keeping us informed, and we'll continue. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next, we have item 3.2, Realized Las Cruces Progress Report. We'll have Larry Nichols doing the introductions.
Good afternoon, Mayor Enriquez, City Council, City Manager, City staff, and members of the public. I'm Larry Nichols, Community Development Director. Very pleased to be here today to discuss with you the progress that we've been making on the update for what we call the Realize Las Cruces. Realize Las Cruces is formerly the updates and adjustments to the Land Development Code, referenced as the Zoning Code. We started these updates on several of our codes and our regulatory items 2 or 3 years ago. What were they? They were the comprehensive plan, the Elevate Las Cruces. They were our building codes. And now we're working with Realize Las Cruces, the Land Development Code. Realize, why would it have that name? Well, we realized that our codes had not been revised since 2001. We are currently operating on the 2001 zoning code. Then we had the subdivision code that was in 2000. We realized that that needed to be updated. And then we had our design standards that were last updated in 2012. Our comprehensive plan was basically in 2000. It was minor revisions in 2010. What's changed for Las Cruces during these last 20 years, we have new business practices, we have new technology, we have an increase in population, we have new types of businesses wanting to come into our zoning districts, and this update is addressing those concerns. But most importantly, the vision and the value of Elevate Las Cruces, our comprehensive plan, which brings a creditable effort to implement that vision with these updates. We have today with us our consultant that has been shepherding this review for the last nearly 2.5 years. Our consultant is Friesen Nichols. They're the primary consultant. We have Dana Kyle, our law firm, a consultant, and LI Engineering as a sub-consultant. The purpose of the project is to update our land development codes of Las Cruces that would appear in the municipal code. It's an execution tool that allows us for future and policies and future development of Elevate Las Cruces comprehensive plan. The land development code with major revisions and updates and incorporate our zoning codes, our maps, our subdivision code, our design standards. The status reports and next steps will be discussed today with our consultant in this work session, and the city draft of the draft codes and the city council feedback and next steps. I'm pleased to be introducing now our consultant from Friesen Nichols, Erica Craycroft, Don Warwick, Karen Perez. Also, I want to recognize the city staff that have been involved in this for this last 2.5 years. Primarily, Dave Weir, our Deputy Director of Community Development, Adam Ochoa, Sarah Gonzalez, Catherine Harrison Rogers, and our Community Development GIS staff. And with that, I yield the floor to Ms. Craycroft.
Thank you, Mr. Nichols, and good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for having us here with you today. So again, on our introductions, my name is Erica Craycroft, and I'm the project manager for the Development Code Update. Joining me today is the Assistant Project Manager, Don Warwick, also Karen Perez, one of our project engineers helping out, and the three of us are all with Friesen Nichols, and we are supported by Fred Lopez, primarily on the roadway components, and also local attorney Dana Kyle. So that's a quick look at the team that has been working on it on the consulting side. For the agenda for this presentation, I'll start out with a process reminder for anyone who's maybe forgotten or is newer to the process about where we've been so far. Next, I'll look at some draft highlights that we have in the current draft code and also call out some of the major revisions for folks to be aware of. Looking also ahead at the next steps, what we propose moving forward with the code. And lastly, I'd be happy to take any questions or comments that anyone may have. Overall, the question for you all today is our next step after this, we would like to have a community open house. So the question is, are we ready to move forward to that open house, or are there any other revisions that you would like to see to the draft before we formally present it to the public for their feedback? So first, starting with the code update process and how we got here. As Mr. Nichols mentioned, the city had adopted the Elevate Comprehensive Plan a couple of years ago, and that included a significant amount of community engagement through that process with subcommittees and public meetings. And all of that input came into the comprehensive plan. And in the comprehensive plan, there's about 500 different recommendations, and they're all different types. Some of those are capital improvement projects that the city can do. Some are additional studies that might be required. But a lot of them, about 200 of them, are related to the development code effort. So we've used that really as a guidebook for what did Elevate say we should do in this situation, and trying to really pull forward the public input and the recommendations that came out of that plan. So our first step on that, when we went through the plan to identify the different recommendations related to the code update, we put them all in a spreadsheet and started organizing them for what sections of the code can we use to address each one of these. So that's been a very intentional focus, and I'll highlight some examples of that as we move through the presentation. So just a general idea of the project scope. These are the sections of your current codes that we are updating. There are major updates, I would say, to the zoning section and the zoning map, the subdivision section, some edits as well to drainage, signs, roads and rights-of-way, landscaping, parks, trails, and open space, tree preservation, and screening and fencing. So just to give you some context about which parts of the code are we looking at, these are generally our areas of focus. Our process has been a three-phase process starting back in 2021. And the first step of that was what we called a diagnostic evaluation. And during that time, we reviewed your existing codes, reviewed your existing plans like Elevate, the Active Transportation Plan, and others as well, and made our own recommendations, but also we spent a lot of time talking with your city staff, the city's elected and appointed officials, to hear from everyone about what's working well or maybe not working as well, but also a lot of the applicants who use or are affected by the code, local developers and home builders, real estate professionals, and others during that time at the beginning. So that phase one concluded with a diagnostic report that we brought to Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. Some of you may remember back in the fall of 2021. The main part of our three-phase process is really spent in phase two. That's drafting the code. We've been working very closely with your city staff through this time, putting together the draft code. Also, your city staff has been working with a technical advisory committee, or TAC, throughout this process to help us with refining the drafts. At the conclusion of phase two, that was whenever we had a complete draft that we felt was ready to move forward and begin the review and refinement process, which is really what we're doing here in phase three. So we're kind of at the very beginning of phase three, where we have a complete document, and now's the time to review that for any rough edges or anything that we need to clean up before we move into any formal adoption or formal public hearings or anything like that. We have had some significant community input to date. I mentioned during phase one, whenever we had the code user input, we had roughly 30 participants, maybe more, in that process that we talked to at the very beginning. I mentioned city staff has been working with the technical advisory committee. They've had more than 30 meetings with that group, getting input and sharing that input with us. So that's been very helpful. We also had a virtual open house at the beginning of the process. We'd planned to have an in-person one, but however, that was during COVID times, so we were limited to virtual only, but we were able to keep that extended throughout all of phase two. So that's been kind of the trade-off for the open house at the beginning of the process. But since that time, more recently, we have posted a earlier working draft. That's the dated March 13th draft. We posted that draft online, and we did receive some comments on that. There were more than 200 comments. That's the screenshot that you see on the right side here, of people who reviewed the draft, or at least the summary of the draft, and they were able to provide comments. And in addition to those that you see here online, there were about 200 other comments that were emailed to city staff that were passed along to us. So we have had pretty significant input to date, and we've used that input to make some adjustments to the draft that hopefully you've had a chance to review, but that's the one that's dated June 10th. So looking at some of the major revisions, and this goes all the way back to whenever we started this process. So the map that you see here is from the Elevate Las Cruces Comprehensive Plan on the left. This is the future development map showing various place types. And we use this as a guide for putting together the new zoning districts. In the zoning district section, you'll see districts that are called character-based zoning districts. Those have an underlying base district. That's the NH 1, 2, or 3, NH standing for neighborhood. These are the ones that are more the residential components. And the districts regulate more about the uses that are permitted in these areas. And those are coupled with 3 different sets of character-based standards. Those are urban, suburban, and rural. So those are more about the character, the look and the feel of, more what the buildings look like, what are the setbacks and things like that. So those really work together to implement this, the place types and the future development map from Elevate. In addition to those character-based zoning districts, we also have several what we call traditional or conventional zoning districts. Those are the commercial and retail, 2 open space districts, and 2 industrial districts as well. So here you can see a comparison, and I'll zoom in the next slide just a bit, but wanted to show the full context with the airport. But on the left, again, this is the Elevate Future Development Map, and on the right side is our draft zoning map. So zooming in a little bit more, you can start to see some similarities for where these areas align with the zoning map. And so again, these are showing the districts part for the 3 NH districts. And then we also have the character areas. So you see again how those can correlate to what's in the place type map. So those 2 again work together to implement the different place types in the future development map. Elevate also identifies overlay place types that you see in this map. The town center and mixed-use corridor overlays are brought forward into the draft code. So here you can see the mixed-use corridors are the orange lines on the map. Town center overlays are the bigger yellow circles. And the purpose of these is really to increase density and create vibrant areas in these places. These are optional overlays with the intent being to add more flexibility, but in exchange for providing higher quality development, you get bonuses like increased density, for example, to encourage people to use these. Also on this map, you'll see the blue circles. Those are the neighborhood centers that were identified in Elevate. The blue circles that are here are not necessarily intended to be the specific locations, but more just general guidance about where they might be appropriate. And so our recommendation for approaching the neighborhood centers was to consider them as a permitted use type, so that way they could be allowed by SUP rather than requiring a rezoning. So just to help streamline the process and help it be a little bit more usable than a zoning district. So that could be implemented a little bit easier. As I mentioned, the mixed-use corridor overlay is shown in the kind of orange coral color here, how those match up with what was in Elevate. We did include the entire parcel for these areas, so that's why you see kind of the jagged area. And then the yellow circles are these town center overlays, so all of those were translated over into a mapped overlay. Elevate also provided a future thoroughfare map with direction and guidance on streetscape design. So that was something that we referred to, putting together the draft roadway cross-sections. You see an example here where we tried to really include multimodal approaches for not just cars, but also transit, bicycle, and pedestrians as well. We also have some updates related to landscaping, trees, and parks. One of those is really increasing street trees, parking lot landscaping within the parking lots, expanding the screening buffers section, looking at tree removal requirements, neighborhood park dedication, which I'll talk a little bit more about shortly, and also trail dedication. And some other items that were recommended by Elevate and some of your other plans that we've pulled forward. There's a larger focus on building form standards, and what I mean by building form is more about how a building interacts with the pedestrian realm. So what are the setbacks, how much of the building is windows that I can see in versus just a blank wall, or any kind of architectural design. So that's been a big consideration. Also supporting what we call missing middle housing variety. For anybody that's not familiar with that term, missing middle refers to any type of housing that's between a single-family home and a large, typically apartment building. So missing middle is more about duplexes, quadplexes, accessory dwelling units, smaller apartments. So looking for ways that we can incorporate missing middle into our community. Also, neighborhood service uses, these are things like maybe there's a corner store that's in a neighborhood or something that you can walk to. So maybe you don't have to drive everywhere for every errand, helps promote walkability. Also, multimodal TIAs, or traffic impact analyses, is something that we have incorporated in the draft, as well as considerations for enhanced connectivity, both for vehicles, bikes, and pedestrians. So I mentioned that we had a March 13th draft that we shared online, and we received about 200 public comments online and about 200 comments via email. And so we spent a lot of time going through those comments and reviewing those and talking with city staff about which recommendations did we want to take forward into this draft. So we do have some edits. If you have a copy of the June 10th draft, there's a track changes version that's available on the website if you want to see, maybe you spent time reviewing March 13th and what changed since then. So track changes are available on the website, which is realizelascruces.com. So take a look at that. There's also a brief summary that highlights the edits. So I'll go through some of the more notable changes that we made. The ones I highlighted here are ones where we maybe heard the same comment from several different folks rather than individual comments. Not to say that we didn't make those edits, but just trying to present what's most of interest to more people. So moving through the document chronologically, starting in general provisions, we did receive some comments about the DRC membership, the Development Review Committee, which is the city staff group. So there was some concern about whether we had senior enough positions making the DRC decisions, and so we did make some edits here to specify that only the director or assistant director of a department can serve on the DRC, or in the event that that department doesn't have someone that's called the director, it would be an equivalent title. So it's not any designee in the department, it has to be the director or assistant director. We also added some flexibility for the city manager to appoint if there are any additional city staff positions that are needed for a particular application. The city manager can appoint others that have relevant experience in terms of like that specific subject matter related to development. Also related to the flexible development standards, some of the comments we received were related to wanting to make sure that there was some kind of notification to the neighbors if there was a flexible development standard that was being considered. So the revision that we made in response to these comments was basically there's two types of flexible development standards. One is city staff can approve it, and then the other one is it requires DRC approval. So city staff can approve certain numerical deviations. So we said if the deviation is greater than 20%, then we need to notify the immediate neighbors. However, if it's a change that's significant enough that it requires DRC approval, you always have to notify the adjacent properties. So there would be notification for the more significant deviations. We also received some comments related to historic preservation. We had in the draft, there was an exemption that would allow the city to be able to demolish its own structures without going through the historic preservation requirements, but received some feedback that that was not desirable and that the city should go through the same process as everyone else. So we did take out that provision that exempted the city. Through the public comments online, we got a lot of comments related to uses that are permitted in the residential districts, which are, again, those NH districts. So we took another look at what types of housing is allowed in those districts, keeping in mind at the same time we want to promote missing middle housing as well. So we want to be inclusive, but is there anything that we can adjust in here to promote compatibility between these different uses? So some of the changes that we made is for the multifamily dwellings that are the smaller buildings between 5 and 12 units. So that would require an SUP in NH1, which NH1 is the most residential district. There's really limited commercial in NH1, so primarily residential. So we recommended that the 5 to 12 units require an SUP in that most residential district. For the larger multifamily dwellings, which is 13 or more units, we recommended that we do an SUP both for NH1 and NH2. So for those, if there was a multifamily dwelling coming into NH1 or NH2, according to these, an SUP would be required, so there would be a public hearing with notice that would be provided, so folks would be aware about the proposed development and be able to provide comments. Other provisions that we included to support compatibility, so if those uses are allowed, we took a look specifically at NH1 and NH2, which again are the more residential districts, and in the rural or suburban areas. So this wouldn't apply in NH3 and it wouldn't apply in urban, so only in these places. So if there's a duplex, triplex, or quadplex that's coming in, if it is adjacent to an existing single-family home, the duplex, triplex, quadplex needs to include design features that make it look as though it's a single-family home. So that would be things like only having one entrance that faces the street, so it just looks more like a single-family home. It can still be a 2, 3, or 4-plex, but it just has a character that's more compatible with the other buildings on that block. For the smaller multifamily dwellings, the 5 to 12 units, we put in restrictions that it must be located on a collector street and at an intersection. So it could be an intersection of a collector and a local, or a collector, arterial, any other kind of street, but it has to be on a collector or larger street and at an intersection. So it wouldn't be in the middle of an existing neighborhood, for example. If that is abutting an existing single-family home, we did include a 10-foot buffer that would include trees and a 6-foot masonry wall to buffer between those two uses. And then for the larger multifamily dwellings, the 13 or more units, those would have to be at the intersection of not only one collector street, but the other street also has to be a collector or larger. So again, trying to not have something that might be disruptive to a neighborhood right in the middle of the neighborhood. It's more in kind of the intense areas, buffering that area from outside. And again, if there's abutting an existing single-family home, it would require a buffer, but this time it would be a 35-foot buffer instead of a 10-foot buffer. So a larger increase because the difference in compatibility between a single-family home to a 24-unit apartment building, for example. So we thought that that would help with some of the compatibility between existing single-family neighborhoods and increasing missing middle housing. Next, we received some comments related to animal raising, and this one was more of a clarification item in our approach, but we did add a couple of new uses here that we think help address the concern. So one of the new uses is called animal raising accessory, and the purpose of that is to say that livestock animals or agricultural practices, like even beekeeping, that those are permitted as an accessory use. If you have a home and you have a small farm, you're keeping animals, you're raising bees or something in addition to your single-family home, that's always permitted as long as it meets the city's Chapter 7 code about animal raising, which restricts the number of animals that you can have based on your lot size and things like that. So that's more about the nuisances side. And then the other animal raising general agriculture, that's more for the smaller mid-sized farms where it's not in conjunction with a house. It's a standalone farm, but it's not the really large feedlot type industrial farms. So we added that as a permitted use by right in H1 and in the heavy industrial district. Next, in the online public comments, there were a lot of comments about the cannabis provisions. So we made some adjustments to the permitted use chart related to cannabis businesses. One was removing the cannabis dispensary from NH1 and NH2 and requiring an SUP in NH3. We changed the cannabis indoor agriculture in NH3 to require an SUP instead of being allowed by right. and changed the micro business to take that out of NH2 and leave it in NH3, but it would require an SUP. So this one's a little bit easier to follow looking at the graphic rather than just the text. So you can see the red circles are where something has been deleted, blue has been added. So we did back that down a little bit from where that was permitted before. We also heard some comments of folks concerned about the types of non-residential uses that could be allowed in their neighborhoods. As I mentioned, we're trying to support having more neighborhood services in walking distance to folks, but maybe some of those might not be appropriate in all areas. So we did take another look at those. You'll see a lot of track changes in that document. One I wanted to highlight specifically was both the bar and the tap and tasting room. There was a lot of concern from the community about not wanting bars in their neighborhoods, for example. So we did take out any allowance for those two uses in NH1 and NH2 entirely, and did change NH3 to require an SUP. And there's another list here of about 18 more uses here, where we made some adjustments in what's allowed where and whether it's by right or by SUP. The next one is moving into the subdivision regulations. This one, again, is another clarification item. In the substantial completion policy, we did make an edit to clarify that if you meet the requirements for substantial completion, that not only can the building permit be issued, but also the final plat can be filed as well. So final plat gets filed, building permits are issued, and the point of that is to allow the plats to be filed, building permits to start before everything's 100% in place. It's like 99.5% in place. And that's a current city policy. The point of this update was just to formalize that policy into the code. One change that we have made in the most recent draft was related to the connectivity index. That was something that we had proposed in a previous draft. It's calculated through using a ratio of street segments to intersections in a neighborhood, and we got a lot of feedback that was really confusing for a lot of people to use, kind of difficult to administer. And we looked at that again with city staff, and our recommendation was that we could take this out because we think that connectivity improvements are really strongly addressed through new provisions for block lengths and block perimeter, both of which relate to the different character areas. So we think that that's been a helpful addition, also including some new cul-de-sac regulations. So we think that the connectivity issue is still moving forward through those provisions, and maybe we don't necessarily need the connectivity index. I did want to mention the traffic impact analysis section. We put a note in the draft saying that this section is in progress. That's something that we heard a lot about from the local development community and builders, that maybe we don't have that one quite right, ready to present to the public yet. So that's something that your city staff, Public Works Department, is really working closely with those code users to get that section refined and make sure that that's ready to present and move forward. Next, the park dedication amount. This was I think really the only update that we made to the parks section since the last time, but we had a placeholder for it because the city was working through the park impact fee process, and so we were waiting for some information to come out of that process to inform what we included here. So the addition that we added, there's a table in that section where you can see with the, again, the track changes, but we did specify it's 1 acre of neighborhood parkland to be dedicated per 188 units. And again, that is specifically about neighborhood parks. So those are the smallest ones. The larger parks, which are the community and regional parks, those are going to be addressed through your impact fees, which is a separate document and separate process. And lastly are some dark sky improvements that we made to the outdoor lighting section. So we did add some graphics like you see here. The purpose of dark sky improvements is to try to move toward the right side of the graphic where all of the light is fully shielded, everything's shining down, and you can start to see the night sky better. It's better for animals, it's better for humans and the environment in general. So we wanted to be sure that that was very clear, that what we mean by that, and also that all outdoor lighting must be fully shielded. Other dark sky improvements was requiring warm lighting in the lower intensity areas, removing some exceptions for flag lighting to exceed the overall lighting allowance, specifying the architectural uplighting has to be close to the building, so it's not placed really far away by the street and just lighting up the entire property, trying to be sure that it's really focused on highlighting the architectural features of a building. And also removed exceptions for nighttime reduction for some uses. There's a nighttime reduction that's required for any use that is lit overnight around midnight or so for a dimming feature. And those, the dark sky improvements were consistent with a lot of the feedback that we received through the community input as well. There was a lot of support for dark sky improvements. So next, looking ahead at what we would propose as the next steps, I mentioned that we would like to have an open house event where we would take the draft document and present it to the community as, here's our draft, it's still in progress, what does everyone think about it? That would be an in-person event, look sort of like the pictures that you see here with boards or posters and inviting people to come down and learn about the process and the draft and what it might mean for them. We would include an educational component because a lot of residents may not be familiar with what a development code is or how zoning works or how it applies to them. So we would be sure to include that. Also telling folks what are some of the highlights of the draft and having opportunities for feedback from them, whether that's writing comments on the board, but also a lot of times that looks like one-on-one discussions here, like you see the setup in the left side picture, where we can sit down individually with a property owner if they're concerned about how does this affect my property and my use, what does it mean for me? We can look up their address and be able to help them with any questions or concerns that they might have. In addition to the in-person event, we would also have an online equivalent if that's more convenient for others to participate in. That would be available as well. So our proposed next steps, I mentioned after today, if there's any revisions that the council would like to direct us to make, we would be happy to make those. We would move forward into that open house event. We would also like to circle back with all of those code users, or at least some of the code users that we met with at the beginning of the process, and get their feedback about, here's the draft that we put together. Does this address your concerns? Do you still have remaining concerns here that we need to address? So that would be another kind of official round of public input. Once we got that input from the open house and those additional conversations, we would bring that back to council and Planning and Zoning Commission and present that to you about, here's the input that we heard from the community, here's their concerns, and here's 20 revisions that we might consider based on what we heard with that, and have some discussion with you all. So you would have a chance to review all of that input. After that, we would be moving forward into the formal public hearings, where we've spent a lot of time talking with the public and code users and elected and appointed officials about the draft. So we would be ready to move into formal public hearings, which would be Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation and ultimately City Council adoption. So that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions or comments that you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you so much for your presentation. When you first started, I thought you were talking about the area across the street from the Mountain View, but this is a general revamp of the code.
Yes, Councilor,
Okay.
It is citywide.
Okay, it's citywide. Okay, so the historic preservation part states that the city is not exempted. So that means that our committee, which is consists of local people, in our city would be making those decisions or recommendations?
Yes, it would follow the same process, which is how the regulations are currently written today, if I'm not correct. Yeah,
What
so
regulations?
the historic preservation regulations right now, the city would be subject to those regulations. This was a proposed addition to exempt the city, but that was not
To make
supported.
it clear.
It was not supported by the community comments, so we took out our proposed exemption and left that part as it is today.
Okay, so, and this might be outside of the, not within your boundaries of what you're
Sure.
here for, but my concern is about having a committee. Who's going to get their head beheaded here? Larry or David? It's always David. So can you speak to that, please?
Mayor and Councilor Flores, David Weir, the Community Development Department. Could you indulge me and repeat your question?
Well, of course you weren't listening to me. It's okay. You never listen to me. One of the what I'm asking is, the city is exempted from the historic preservation aspect of a development. So who has that oversight, or is it our historic preservation committee, or?
Councilor Flores, roughly 4 years ago, the city adopted a historic preservation ordinance. And within that ordinance, there are provisions on how the city gets the building permit or the modifications to their properties that are on the historic registry or the state registry. And so there is a process that goes forward. What there was an exemption for was when the city goes to, if there was property owned by the city and the city was using federal funds, we have to get clearance from the state historic preservation office. And so in those instances, we were asking for an exemption. But like I said, in the feedback that was received when the initial draft was put forward was that the city property should go through the same process as private properties. And so that's the way the draft has been modified or redlined, so that there's equal treatment of private and public properties. And then the review would take place by the Historic Preservation Commission. And then if
The commission, that means the state?
No, that's the city's
The
Historic
city.
Preservation Commission.
Okay. And I was calling it a committee, but I misspoke. And when you said commission, I thought maybe that was a state. Okay, thank you, Mr. Weir. And I have a couple of more questions. When you started, I thought you were referring to that place. And all of this is pretty consistent with what you presented based on that community. I think it was because it was COVID, so it was all done via Zoom. But the feedback you got from those who participated was very cohesive. I think it applies to any part in the city. So are you using that as a framework to work from in the rest of the city? Because most of New Mexico, I mean, most of Las Cruces, the undeveloped areas, do seem to be somewhat rural. I mean, it isn't as if, we're building up in New York City or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So did you take that into account?
Yes. The comment that we asked for at the beginning of the process was very open-ended about, what type of development would you like to see, just getting general input, whereas now we're asking, we have a draft for you to look at, what do you think about this draft? So in the beginning, the open-ended input that we were hearing, a lot of it was support for walkable places, mixed use, affordable housing options, things like that.
Yeah.
So yes.
I think one of my concerns is parking. And again, I'm focused on that area just north of Loman. And by the way, it isn't Oñate High School anymore. I saw 2 slides with that name, and it made me cringe. It's now called Oregon Mountains,
Okay.
Oregon Mountain High School.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so I just want to make sure that I know that we had a former counselor who was very contributed a lot in that meeting we had in December of 2021. It was December, right after Thanksgiving, I think.
Sounds right.
Yeah, and there
Late
were a
2021.
lot of people who participated, but that counselor was Sharon Thomas. And she made the request that the middle housing or lower income housing would blend in with everything else. And her words were that the high-end property owners wouldn't be saying, oh, well, we don't want to be too close to those people. So is that part of the plan to incorporate housing, mixed housing, or is it going to be an isolated corner?
Great question. We have heard mixed input on support for the missing middle housing, like what you're talking about, incorporating more variety, versus the public comments that, you know, folks have concerns about what's in my neighborhood. I live in a single-family neighborhood. I want it to be a single family. So we've been trying to really balance both of those interests, and I think that our proposed compatibility provisions and the adjustments that we made in this draft, I think, help really reach that balance where we do still allow accessory dwelling units by right in all of the NH districts. We allow the 2, 3, and 4 unit buildings by right, subject now to the design requirements and spacing that they have to be on a collector. So we're still including a lot of flexibility about where different types of housing can go in, and just trying to mitigate the impacts on the neighborhoods through
Okay,
things
and
like
is
those
that
buffers.
codified, Mr. Weir? So the mixed housing is codified so that our builders, yes.
Mayor and Councilor Flores, when the realize a document is adopted, it will become the zoning standards for the city, and then in coordination with the zoning map, it will, as Ms. Craycraft said, the single family is allowed by right in all NH 1, 2, and 3. The 1 to 4 plexes are allowed by right in the 1, 2, and 3. And then based on if you're a neighborhood 1, neighborhood 2, neighborhood 3, there are some special use for the higher density apartment units so that we can look at the impacts and compatibility with the existing neighborhood. But there is an ability to do that, and there's an increase in the flexibility in the number of units that can be provided. I guess the other point is that all residential uses are allowed an accessory dwelling unit by right. So even existing single-family homes could allow another dwelling unit on their property.
You said by right. What does that mean?
That means
It's codified?
it's codified, and if they came in for a building permit for that, we would issue that administratively. It wouldn't have to go to the P&Z or City Council.
Okay. I had another question. It'll pop up later. Thank you, Mr. Weir. And thank you very much for indulging.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flores. Anyone else? Councilor Matisse.
David, this may be a question for you. In your codes, there was a discussion made that when you, the city, it says the city will mail notifications to property owners, I think within 500 feet. And then it went on to say that the requirement to also notify neighborhood associations in addition to property owners within 500 feet is no longer required. I mean, that's in your document. So maybe we could delete that and change it, because there's a lady, Katrina, that does a great job, and I have a list of 34 associations, the captains, the presidents, and I've been meeting with 4 or 5 of them almost every month. So they're very strong. So they'd be a great asset to notify when you have the public meetings and/or make any changes in the neighborhood.
Mayor and Councilor Matisse, the 500 feet is public notice that's required by state statutes for zoning and subdividing. The neighborhood association early notice is something that the city adopted by policy, and in the latest revision, we added that back in. We heard comments that there was a desire for additional public notice. So not only the notification of the homeowners or neighborhood organizations, but also the process when an early notification meeting would have to be required by a developer. So we're with you.
I knew you were going to do that to me. Thank you, David.
Councilor McClure.
Hello, thank you for your presentation. I had a question from slide 37. If you could go back to that. I definitely understand restrictions on things, but some of this seems a little vague to me. For example, personal services. Can you detail a little bit more? Because if we do want to have the ability to combine some things, or even a grocery store, I understand we don't want maybe even a Walmart market in a residential area, but smaller grocery stores, things like that. This seems a little bit restrictive to me, so I'm hoping there would be a little bit more clarity to that. I see you're flipping through, thank you.
Okay, sorry, I wanted to have the full definition and what's permitted where in front of me. So thank you for your question. We, again, made some of these edits. Well, backing up, whenever we made the original draft, we did try to incorporate more of these neighborhood services in the neighborhoods, again, for that walkability, so people maybe don't have to drive so much to different places. But in a lot of the public comments that we received online, there was not a lot of support for having businesses in the neighborhoods. So we wanted to take another look and try to really take NH1, that is, again, the most residential district, and review that one the most closely and take out a lot of uses that we had included. Most of them were really already requiring an SUP. But anything that was not a community type use, we did take those out. So there's things like botanical garden is still allowed, maybe an art studio by SUP. The neighborhood centers that I mentioned that are the blue circles on the map, that's a type of mixed use development that would still be allowed by SUP. But you mentioned specifically about personal services being one that was taken out. Okay, so we talked about those being examples like beauty and barber shops, dry cleaning or a laundromat, and incidental retail sales that those might have. So if you had a beauty salon, it would be the sales of shampoo and other products like that. So that was taken out of NH1, but left in NH2 and NH3. So just trying to take another look and recalibrate the non-residential uses.
Councilor McClure, one other thing I wanted to call out is the city's always had what I think is a pretty robust home occupation criteria. All of that remains in this code, so if you're a single operating beautician, have like a single chair, you'd still be allowed to do that from your home. It's just that it's a smaller area and less impact, so things like lessons, if you do taxes on an individual basis, those would still continue to be allowed. And I believe there was a use added called sundry, which is those small marketplaces, and so that's another use that would be allowed in these NH neighborhoods. Right? No.
Thank you.
Okay, strike the sundry. That was my misinterpretation.
And these haven't been removed from all of the NH districts. There's some modification, so maybe it's changed only in NH1, for example. And it's a little easier to see in the track changes version.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thanks, Mayor. Hi, thank you for being here and for all the work you've been doing this far. I have some questions as well. I have some concerns with the modifications that you have been made that were presented on page 32, 33, in that area. How are you balancing community comments with, and so you spoke to this a little bit, but I guess I want to understand your process a little bit better on how you balance community comments with educating the public on why we're trying to move away from exclusionary zoning and why exclusionary zoning is harmful, and educating the public on the facts as well. And so how are you balancing those two very real things? And you as experts in this work, I think, know better than anybody that zoning laws are deeply political. And so how are you sort of balancing the needs for creating healthier, more vibrant neighborhoods and some of the community comments that we're receiving regarding building more barriers and building more and lifting up more exclusionary zoning practices?
Great question. I think that educational component at the open house that I mentioned is going to be very important to help share that message about why we want to include these different housing types. As far as our research and expertise, we did take a look at, it's been a nationwide trend of eliminating single-family zoning for a lot of cities across the country. And so we took a closer look at what those cities are doing and how is it going. So most of the ones, maybe all of the ones that we looked at, the most that they allow in single-family areas at the more conservative end is up to 4 units by right. And so that's more what we've shifted to. So 1 to 4 units would be allowed by right. That's consistent with what we see nationwide. And then our provisions for NH 2 and 3 allow a little bit more variety beyond the 4. Even the 5 to 12 could be allowed in the NH 1, but it would require an SUP. So based on reviewing nationwide practices of what other cities have been doing and what are some of the compatibility provisions that can be included.
I deeply believe that some of these changes are actually maintaining barriers that will allow more access to more affordable housing to be built, for more missing income housing to be built. I think the more barriers that we add and uphold, the more it will cost for developers, and the less developers will then want to develop in those areas. And we are in a housing crisis in this community and in this country. And arguably, the housing crisis was created historically by exclusionary zoning policies that have been maintained for decades, that frankly, I think are rooted deeply in class and race issues. And I would love to see Realize Las Cruces be bold in how we approach the next 20, 30 years in our community. And I want to be able to work. So right now our housing department works with very limited developers that really do work in affordable housing work because it's so complicated, because it's so hard, that those folks that's a small list. We want to be able to create a much bigger list for developers to want to build in the infill, to want to build multifamily housing, and for neighborhoods to be vibrant. What ends up happening also is that we end up concentrating poverty, and then low-income families have less opportunities to. I don't have to tell you these things because you are the expert. I guess I just feel like there has to be a balance between what we're hearing from community members, honestly, sometimes very politically leaning type of commentary, and the education that has to be presented to the public around why some of these pieces are essential for building vibrant neighborhoods. And so I feel like you've done revisions and revisions to this particular piece, but I still don't think it's right. And I would really love us to go back to, and obviously the open house I think will be good, but I just don't think this piece is right yet. And the more barriers we create, I think the harder it will be for us to meet the gap of housing that we are so desperately needing.
Okay, thank you.
So I will say that on that. On page 35, you talked about some of the cannabis restrictions. I'll definitely do my part in encouraging some of the cannabis advocates and industry to provide some of this commentary, but do you know have you all met with cannabis industry folks that are providing some feedback on this as well?
Not locally.
Okay,
No.
I will definitely do my part in encouraging them to get involved in this.
Thank you.
And then it was brought to my attention, you didn't present on it today, but the piece around annexation, it is brought to my attention that perhaps what's in Realize in the language right now is different than what's in Elevate, and that Elevate perhaps had stronger, more definitive language. And so I'm just curious if what the sort of mix of that has been.
I believe that was addressed in the last draft.
Okay.
Unless maybe that comment came more recently, but we did hear a related comment and went back to Elevate and took exactly the text and put it in.
Perfect.
I think it's in verbatim in the latest draft, but
Perfect.
I will double
Sorry,
check.
I was not updated on
That's
that,
okay.
but that's...
It's a long document to review twice.
That's great to hear. And then just to Councilor McClure's point regarding the items on slide 37, I do also, and just the grocery piece caught my eye because we've been working with our economic development department as well on the opportunity that we have with retail LIDA funding and things like that to potentially do expansions to grocery store, locally owned grocery stores. I am curious about some of the data points as we're building Realize Las Cruces, if we're looking at data points like the number of people, like the population that lives in a food desert, for example, and then if these restrictions then add to those kinds of harsh realities that exist in our community.
Mm-hmm. We could also take another look at the list of uses that you see here, see if there's some that would be appropriate to put back in, like the local grocery store, and that already does have a square footage restriction on how large that can be to try to promote compatibility. Maybe that needs to be an even smaller one in H1 or something like that, but we can certainly re-review this list.
Okay, thank you. I think the list generally looks, pretty right on, but the grocery store piece, I think just had more implications.
Okay.
And then those are all my questions. I really wanted just to frame my comments around the items on the slides 32 and 33 and really hoping we can continue that conversation. I just believe that it's not quite right yet. So thank you, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Flores?
Thank you, and thank you again. Insofar as the land use, we have builders and we have the landowners, and then we have realtors. And my district, when I first ran for office about too many years ago, I was surprised to be attacked, as a candidate to be on city council, as to why their view of the Oregon Mountains had been blocked, and basically blaming, I guess it was a directive for me to look into. And I just said, well, who told you that you'd always have, the realtor. And I said, well, the realtor doesn't represent the builders, the landowners. And I said, so that's really the response. So our builders know exactly what they're building based on what the landowner wants. And so does some of this burden of representing to the prospective buyer fall on the realtor? And is there anything that we can possibly do about that or not?
We do include the maximum building heights for each district in the code, but I'm not aware of anything in the development code that we could do to help with the realtor situation. That is a common complaint that we hear in cities, so.
Well, maybe I'll talk to our city attorney about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Councilor Grant.
Thank you. Not a question, just some comment. And I just want to add on to what Mayor Pro Tem said, because I am right there with her on everything. at the top, I live in a C2, so I'm in a commercial. I'm actually across the street from an M1, which means I am surrounded by some houses, some businesses, light industry. The house right next door to me has been residential, then became a micro business, is now residential again. And I live less than 1/10 of a mile from a cannabis dispensary, and somehow I've still survived. So just throwing that out there, that I think a lot of times when I get feedback about possible zoning changes, a very common thread I hear is, how would you feel if your house had, my house does have all of this stuff. And it is a great neighborhood. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. So I think I always push back on, some of these neighborhood designations or neighborhood character. But what I do want to say is that I can't think of a single person I've talked to who has not said we need more housing, and nobody wants it by them. And I understand that. However, I think speaking as the same that Mayor Pro Tem Bencomo said, this is deeply political, and it takes political will and political courage to move ahead with change that a community needs. I think we have some developers in the audience today, I believe. Oh, thank you. And I think we put developers in a completely untenable situation. We are crying out for more housing. The developers say, here was what we can do. And without the political courage and the political will to make it possible for them, nothing can change. So I just want to add my voice to say that I am going to act with the political courage to see increased housing density, to see mixed-use neighborhoods, and I agree completely that the fewer barriers we have, the better, and not just better for neighborhoods that are being built or developments, better for everyone. I think more about things like fire department response times than most people, because my husband drives a fire truck. And when we give in and just allow building to only happen through sprawl, that doesn't just affect that doesn't affect things like climate and drive time. We are putting our public safety advocates and our public safety, our first responders, at a disadvantage. I think Chief Smith, when Mike started, we had Station 7. We've added Station 8. We're building Station 9. We already need Station 10. Chief Story, I'm sure you can say the same thing. You are in a zone defense. And the more that we allow sprawl to happen, because it takes a lot of political courage to stand up for infill development, the worse off we are across the boards. So, yeah, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Graham. Councilor Matisse.
Thank you. I just have a question on values, if that's been incorporated into this document. And what I'm meaning is, if you have a neighborhood and let's say the homes are $400,000, $500,000, is there a consideration, David or yourself, if you could answer, if you put in a smaller unit, let's say a duplex or a fourplex, what happens to the value of those other homes? Is the assessor lower those because of the lower value of something that goes into, let's say we allow it in gated neighborhoods? What happens there? And the businesses that come in, I worry about the equity, and it's a little bit of personal agenda, because my daughter, she just invested in a home up in by the golf course, and it was pretty expensive. I would just like to see her equity build, so that she would have something that is valuable when she's only 30 years old, but maybe it would grow in value to when she's 50 and not be a target for less value because of trying to build density.
Mayor and Councilor Matisse, the first way I'd like to address your comment is the way the code is addressing that is putting less emphasis on use and more on the built environment, how the homes interact with the public rights-of-way, how the features are cited on them, what they look at, and so that you're creating a neighborhood and a character area that goes forward. So, like I said, that's kind of a tradition from Las Cruces. We've always segregated uses. This is going to allow a more organic, flexible development of neighborhoods and encourage them to take pride in their neighborhood and maintain it. And so, but the safeguards for that is we still have density requirements, we have height requirements, we have landscaping, drainage requirements, and so those public safety matters are addressed. Your second question on property values is a little harder one to address. My understanding of that issue is that it's basically what comparable housing in the general vicinity of that area, what those go for is how property values are established. And anecdotally, I always go to, and it's an area in your district, Mesilla Park is an area that always has maintained its property values, and if they haven't grown. But when you look at it, you have a railroad track goes through it, you have industrial uses, you have commercial, you have condominiums, you have apartments, you have single-family properties, yet it's one of the most stable and highly valued neighborhoods in the community. So if you use that as an example, and there's even mobile home parks in the Mesilla Park area. So I think that's, if we can create vibrant and sustainable neighborhoods, I think those property values will maintain.
No, thank you, David. And I think we have political courage, but I'm really very pleased with the public events that you'll have so that we can hear from the public and the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Okay. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. There are a couple of things that I had a couple of questions. One is you said you're going to continue to work on the TIAs, on the traffic impact analysis. Do you have more or less a time frame on that, on how that's going, or next steps, or where we're at on that?
I'll start, maybe defer to city staff, but ideally we would have it ready ahead of the open house, but it may need to continue, as I mentioned in here, number 2, revisiting with the code users for feedback. We'd like to be able to present it to the public, but that may need to continue. We just want to be sure we get it right.
Mayor, Council, David Cedillo, Public Works Director, for the record. Mayor, to answer your question, those meetings are being scheduled currently right now, and those discussions are being had at this time.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
I have a question for David.
Go ahead, Counselor.
Yeah, for you. Oh, no, you. Yeah, that one. I'm so sorry. Not that one, that one. Thank you, David. But I thought that the TIAs were conducted once the area was already developed. Because remember that fracas we had a few years ago with some land south of, anyway, there was going to be an apartment building, and there'd be a lot of traffic, but it wasn't until it was designed, it wasn't until it was designed that the TIAs were conducted. Isn't that so? Because that's the way you would find out how many, and then, yeah, we've had that subject before, where the TIAs really come in right before the proposed development or the building goes up. Isn't that the way it works? I mean, we can't anticipate right now what the TIA would be.
Mayor, Councilor Flotis, thank you for the question. The TIAs come in conjunction with the development as they come through. It may come in at a different step, but it doesn't come after the development is done. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that we have going on, and as council, we've invested in MRAs with South Solano and El Paseo. Has anything been looked at as far as the land use code, as far as this realized as far as MRAs and moving forward with that.
Mayor David Weir again. The realized Las Cruces and the update of the development codes are anticipated to be complementary to MRAs. The metropolitan redevelopment areas gives the city other opportunities to provide additional investment, additional technical service, and also some financing mechanisms to allow infrastructure to be improved in those areas. But they would work congruently with one another, and they would we would have to make sure when the MRAs are adopted that there's not anything that would create a conflict. I think the intent, actually one of the recommendations in Elevate Las Cruces is to explore the use of MRAs for redevelopment in that area. So the zoning provides kind of that base layer of what we're looking for in the neighborhoods, and then the MRA is a tool to actually see you realize that taking place. So the intent is for them to be hand in hand, and so it'll be incumbent on us all to make sure that takes place.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Again, Erica, thank you for the presentation. Normally at work sessions, it's an informative session and there's no public comment, but this time I know there's a lot of members of the community that came out, and it'll give a good indication or a good idea of when the next steps and when the open house would take place based on the comments. So I'd like to open it up now to the public for them to come up, and we have Katrina there. She'll be ushering anybody that wants to speak. She'll just go by the rows and get you lined up so that you can speak. At this point, how many, can I see a show of hands of who wants to speak? Okay, so yeah, if we can do 2 minutes, unless I've already told you you're getting 3 or something to that effect through an email, but you'd have to remind me when you come up. But Katrina will usher you. We'll start on the left-hand side, and then we'll go to the right from the top down. So
Thank you.
thank you. Those of you that are speaking, please state your name, and you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Mayor, City Council, and City Manager, my name is Beth Bardwell, and I'm speaking today on behalf of the more than 100 members of the League of Women Voters of Southern New Mexico in support of the proposed changes to the city's land development code and Realize Las Cruces. The city laid out a long-term vision and plan for future growth in Elevate Las Cruces comprehensive plan in 2020, and that comprehensive plan called for balanced development, preserving our natural setting, fostering economic prosperity, vibrant neighborhoods, and livable community. And today's proposed changes to the Land Development Code are a credible effort to implement that vision and those values, and they deserve your support. There are many benefits to the adoption of the proposed changes, including greater regulatory flexibility for property owners to build and develop their property, provided it's consistent with the character of the neighborhood. The ability to build walkable, mixed-use neighborhoods that combine residential, office space, and community and neighborhood amenities in one place, and because of their mixed use and density, increase your gross receipts tax, decrease the cost of providing city services, and preserve our green space. They also provide for an increase in attainable housing throughout the city, such as condos and townhomes and ADUs and duplexes to quadplexes, small apartments, and cottage courts that collectively, with single-family detached homes, best meet the needs of our diverse city, so that our children and our parents and our service workers and first responders and our young families buying their first home can find homes they can afford and buy in neighborhoods of their choice. The additional compatibility requirements mentioned today in the presentation are barriers to increasing this missing middle housing and should not be adopted. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, it offered 3 minutes in the email, but I'll make it 2 minutes.
Go ahead, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. My name is Christopher Brown. I'm a resident of Las Cruces and a member of the Technical Advisory Committee our consultants discussed. That said, these comments are my own, not those of the committee. As noted in the presentation, we worked very hard for the last 15 months, 33 meetings, hundreds of hours of time were contributed. Members of the development community, advocates for affordable housing and complete streets, the bicycling community, and all others worked together respectfully towards the end. In the few minutes I have, I'd like to focus on 2 issues. Complete streets is a concept the City Council has endorsed with class action that argues that we should plan future roadways to meet the needs of all forms of transportation. I quote from the document, "New development shall be served by a system of sidewalks, paths, greenways, roadways, accessways, and other facilities designed to provide for multiple modes of travel. Motor vehicle, transit, bicycle, and pedestrian access and circulation should be coordinated and implemented to provide safe and efficient mobility." The second issue I'd like to talk about is one that's been raised extensively, affordable housing. The median price of a home in Las Cruces is over $300,000. The median income of a household in Las Cruces is $50,000. If we do the math, we can see it's going to be impossible for young people and first-time homeowners to get in the market if we don't allow reasonably designed, multiple-use housing as has been outlined in the plan. Section 3.2.b support this type of multiple-use housing. I close with a request to Council that you support the ideas in the development code that will allow complete streets and affordable housing to be a reality as Las Cruces continues to grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, council members, my name is Liz Rodriguez Johnson, and I'm a resident of Doñana County and a housing advocate. I'm here today to express my support for increased flexibility in the land development code to build more variety types of housing throughout the neighborhoods in Las Cruces. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is John Munoz, M-U-N-O-Z. Mayor Enriquez, city councilors, Mr. Manager, city staff, and community members. My comments will be primarily focused on the downtown districts. As president of the Downtown Las Cruces Partnership and the chief experience officer of Electronic Caregiver, I am encouraged and I'm excited about the proposed revisions to codes as discussed today. The mission of the Downtown Las Cruces Partnership is to promote business, culture, and art. Removing restrictive regulations is a dream come true, which will open many doors to residents, businesses, artists, and museums. The Downtown Partnership saw record crowds with the recent New Year's celebration, the Chili Drop, covered by CNN internationally. And we are attracting other folks into the downtown areas with things like the Zombie Walk and other events. And so when I talk about the downtown, it's like the living room of Las Cruces. It is core to our community. What's also core is that small business, like the state of New Mexico, employs 53% of New Mexicans. So when you're supporting a local business, you are supporting neighbors, friends, colleagues, and relatives. When the awnings were removed some time ago and Main Street was opened up, that was considered a bold move. Fast forward to today, that initiative has had such a positive impact, not just in downtown and the districts surrounding it, but in the entire city. Having housing and employment options means we keep residents here. It means we keep families together, contributing to the overall economic health of Las Cruces. This is an extraordinary time for Las Cruces, and this is the next step in our journey. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Troy Mitchell. I'm here with the HBA. So the Home Builders Association has quite a few people here today. We're here to kind of discuss the realized Las Cruces. We think there's a lot of good construction and industry partners here today to discuss some issues that we find within the current draft. So we think that Realized Las Cruces does a good job on some aspects and some things, but there's some problems within the current draft that kind of lead to a lack of sustained living and sustainable growth in terms of affordable housing. The problems that we've outlined are few. They're smaller problems within the 400-page document itself, but we're here to highlight some of those issues, and you'll hear a majority of them as we go through them. You can kind of follow along if you'd like. So what we're actually requesting, and we hope, as we're trying to get through these, we highlight enough issues that you see fit to have a stakeholder meeting with the HBA and the consultant and potentially the planning department so that we can go through some of these issues and really make sure that we're either not as vague as some of them are or change them altogether. And so a few of the issues that I wanted to discuss here are going to be Chapter 3. It discusses vehicle and bicycle parking specifically. This goes hand in hand with Section 5.2 F3E6 and 5.2N. So these we feel like should be completely done away with. They actually limit the number of bicycle and vehicle parkings on the minimum as well as the maximum. There's a little bit of contradiction there, and we wanted to kind of discuss that with the consultant if we could get a meeting. And those are my issues, and we're hoping that you guys listen to everything everybody has to say. Thank you.
Sorry, Mayor, can I just ask a quick question?
Oh, yeah.
It's me over here.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
So just to make sure I'm understanding the document, the font, the red font is the HBA.
The red font, the whole font is the HBA. The
Okay.
red font is after the draft came out on the last week. We went through, and some of them had been changed, some of them hadn't been
I
changed.
see. Okay, thank you so much.
Okay.
Councilors, Mayor, Steve Green for the record. Just wanted to address on my section, which would be 43C4.B, which is, it discusses how the customer service approach to the subdivision application process, basically. If the city is looking to create a more approachable application process, then why is the time frame for review and construction plans being increased by 50%? In addition, if construction plans have not been approved after 2 reviews, the community development director should prioritize communication, applicant, and reviews to resolve outstanding issues, and if advisable, arrange to make a meeting to do so. This is a suggestion that was made. There was no change to this document. I think it's fair to bring this up because that's what we've been working to try to strive to, and I think we've been kind of even approaching that with this current city, saying, Larry and them, they have been working to that. Your department has been working to that. And to see that that wasn't written into this was kind of disappointing. I think that we don't want to prolong things. If we can get items addressed quicker, let's try to do that. Next up on mine would go to Chapter 5, which is addressing underneath D, which is cul-de-sac design, dead-end streets. So basically, a cul-de-sac, it says if a cul-de-sac is permitted, if a pedestrian bicycle access is provided. I would just like to see some clarification on that, exactly what and how that is going to be done through the process. Also, it also encourages to basically get rid of cul-de-sacs, which, why? I'm not sure. From a realty standpoint, from design standpoints, a lot of people like living on a cul-de-sac. They find it better for the development of their children. I mean, it's a safer little space. We would like some just definition on why the reason to get rid of the cul-de-sac. I'll take just 1 second longer. So mine was also on Section E of Chapter 5 about roundabout design. It is stating that all roundabouts should be used in all intersections. Now, I think that must be typo or a mistake or not. We would just like clarification on that, because would that mean that every intersection, including inside the internals of a actual subdivision, would require roundabouts? That's just last of my questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
My name is Kelly Fort. I'm with the Fort Construction, and I'm also here on behalf of the Home Builders Association. I really want to summarize this pretty quickly. My background is originally civil engineering with an emphasis in traffic and transportation. Way back when I worked with Dan Soriano in the city of Las Cruces, and we did a ton of fun stuff. I'll focus on the TIA element of the draft, but one thing I kind of want to point out, for example, if you look in section 4.3A1C, I think it's on the 3rd page, there's instances where we have words that are extremely vague, kind of context that's extremely vague, and I want to warn anyone before they put something into code, you do have to be careful of how not specific we're going to be and how specific we're going to be, because it really limits what you can and can't do at the end of the day. Regarding the TIAs, one thing I'd like to push is just when we're in the preliminary stage of design and development, it doesn't do a ton of good to try to be extremely specific with the TIA. Essentially, they're asking for a TIA when we do the preliminary. Then once we go to final plat, they would be asking for another TIA. And then in addition, anytime anyone wants to develop, they would require that person who's building or pulling a building permit to perform a TIA as well. So that's 3 TIAs performed throughout the process. And one thing that I'll leave you guys with a note, I build houses for a living. We just dove off into a development, and I would like to commend the city. They've been extremely helpful in us getting it off the ground. But I will reiterate that any cost that is dumped on me as a developer gets pushed to the builder, and once it gets pushed to the builder, I push every cost that I'm incurred to my end customer. It's just part of the process, and so therefore I really want you guys to think about what we are requiring people to do, because at the end of the day, it's the public that pays for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Steve Montañez. I was a part of the one of the subcommittees, Economic Development, during Elevate Las Cruces. I also spent the last 4 years on the Planning and Zoning Commission in Doña Ana County, where I oversaw close to 120 amendments to their UDC, which I was also part of the Viva Doña Ana initiative. I'm not here to give you my resume, though, but I do want to thank the mayor for our discussions, and also just touch on section 55C, which pertains to park impact fees. I personally believe, and I'm sure many of you will nod your head and believe, that we do have a very good exceptional impact fee system in place. In our current impact fee system, our developers have generously and graciously donated the lot. They designed the park with what we've seen are very good park standards. Once the park's designed and built, it's deeded back over to the city. And also, in addition to that, park impact fees are still collected from builders, developers, and also, as Mr. Fort mentioned, are also, in essence, paid for by the homeowner. In Section 55C, this completely eliminates this initiative that our builders and developers have taken, and just requires them to do it. Gives them a general standard, which is not going to be as high quality as you are seeing now. When you're forcing a builder or a developer to build a park, and they're just going to build to that standard that's required of them, and that's it. So this is a great time to commend some of our developers, like the Thurstons, for their development in Rincon Hills, or Rincon Mesa, I always forget those two. Sierra Norte for their development of pocket parks, and some other concepts in Metro Verde, and some of the others that you've seen. Mr. Mayor, just a couple more. So with that, we have a very giving community. We have very giving development and builder community. And this section here is kind of a jab to them, making it a requirement instead of the system that we do have in place. I did have a couple more here to touch on, but you do have copies. I would also, again, like to join the HBA in requesting another meeting with stakeholders and with our consultants. We did have a very effective meeting at the development of Elevate Las Cruces, where a lot of provisions were removed and adjusted, and I think we can get a lot of that accomplished if we're able to meet, again, with the consultants and potentially some of you. Lastly, Councilor Graham, I would love to speak with you one-on-one about some of the challenges in infill development. So anytime, just reach out to me online. Let's talk. Thank you all very much.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Hello, Mayor, councilors. My name is Jason Lorenz. I build homes here in Las Cruces under the name Velos Homes. Thank you for listening to me today. That little packet you got today, if you'd please turn to page 7, there's a couple items there that I'd like to talk to you about. Yeah, I know they weren't numbered, but so it's section 5 or chapter 5-2 M1. It's talking about sidewalks along residential lots and that they should be required. On 5-2 M6A2, it's talking about when those sidewalks should be built. And basically what it's saying is that the sidewalks should be built during the development of the subdivision, when they put in streets, curb, and gutter, that kind of thing. If we put in sidewalks at that time, those sidewalks are almost surely going to be demolished during construction and need to be rebuilt again after the construction of the home is complete. I completely believe we need sidewalks, and I build them every day, but they should not come at the time of development. I realize that there's this public safety issue for people walking down the street, but I promise you, walking down broken sidewalks, trying to push your baby stroller during construction of that house is not a benefit to them. These sidewalks need to come afterwards. The additional $1,500 to $5,000 per house will affect Mayor Pro Tem's concern about affordable housing when we have to build every single one of those sidewalks twice. The next thing I want to talk about is on the last page of the document that you received. It's the very last item, 58E6. Earlier on in section 52F4A1, it talked about when a residential property was built next to an arterial. In that earlier section, it says on an arterial or collector that that residence should be built to face that arterial, and then access to that residence should be from an alleyway at the back. But yet in section 58E6, it says we should build a 6 to 8 foot high solid masonry screening wall in front of that house that we just were required to build on that street. And it just seems like an oversight. It just needs to be one way or the other. Either the front of the house goes there or the back of the house goes there. It doesn't make sense that it can be both. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, councilors. John Moscato. I was a member of the TAC committee for the last 18 months, but I'm here just as a resident, not as a member of the TAC committee. Just wanted to highlight a few technical items, though, as a developer. For instance, in the summary of approval authorities, there are certain applications, for instance, for TIAs and for drainage studies that are limited in applicant input totally. So there's no DRC, there's no P&Z, there's no city council. It's just a single member of the city administration who is responsible. There's no input from the developer or applicant allowed at all. There's also a provision at 4.2A3C that indicates that construction plans should be submitted with summary subdivision plats, and that the construction of those adjacent roadways should be required as a condition of the plat. That's totally opposite of what's the requirement now. it would really be putting the cart before the horse, because when you are submitting for a plat, you don't even know if the plat's going to be approved. So why go through the process of creating plans and then requiring the developer as opposed to the vertical business user to build those improvements? Then in the summary, in the substantial completion section, which is 4.4D1, there are requirements for street lighting and electrical connections and parks. But at the time we're requesting substantial completion, we don't have power. Sometimes water is only available at the very end of the process. So you can't build a park without power. You can't build a park without water. That's why park improvements historically have been shifted after substantial completion as a separate process and not a requirement of substantial completion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, councilors, city staff, citizens. My name is Randy Himmelgren. I very much appreciate the changes that I see that have been proposed. I especially applaud the requirement that sundry stores have 10% fresh produce. Getting rid of food deserts is always a good idea. My request is that you remember that while walkability is important, for many of us, walkability is very limited. Please bear that in mind when you design parking so that someone has to park at the back of a business and walk to the front to get in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Dennis, and I have a request to make of the mayor. Dr. Judy Berryman, who is the city's chair of the Las Cruces Historic Preservation Commission, could not be here today to speak for herself. She has prepared a written statement, which I will distribute, but she asked that I be given permission to read it into the record. It is 3 minutes. May I do so?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. These are her words. Community development failed to give the Historic Preservation Commission any opportunity to meet with the consultant to discuss Chapter 2 or its revisions. However, there is an opportunity to correct this oversight during the upcoming phase. The Historic Preservation Commission fully supports this as the time for a major revision in the city's development codes, and the commission is requesting a seat at the table in order to assist the city to meet its expressed interest and commitment to promote and protect the historic fabric of Las Cruces as stated in Chapter 2, Declaration of Policy and Intent. Las Cruces is one of only 10 New Mexico entities to have qualified for designation as a certified local government. The city gained this status in 2021. The New Mexico State Historic Preservation Officer stated that he welcomed the city of Las Cruces as a local partner in the federal preservation program and looked forward to working with the city to preserve what makes the community special and significant. As council may be aware, the position of Historic Preservation Specialist became vacant last month, with Dr. Troy Ainsworth abruptly resigning. To maintain its certified local government status, the city is required to have a Historic Preservation Specialist on staff who meets the professional standards set forth by the state certified local government statutes. Making matters worse, consultant changes in Chapter 2 specify that city staff can make decisions regarding historic eligibility, conduct surveys, inventories, and evaluate prior surveys. The term city staff throughout the document must be removed and changed to historic preservation specialist as written in the original historic preservation ordinance. As Councilor Caron stated in her recent bulletin article, Realize Las Cruces is a long-term policy strategy designed to address the housing shortage, and we must do so from every angle. One of those angles must involve the preservation of the city's unique history and culture. Historic preservation is an essential part of helping any city to appreciate its past and to responsibly develop its future. Speaking for the Historic Preservation Commission, I implore you, Mayor, City Manager, City Councilors, to give us a voice during the next phase of Realize Las Cruces. Over the past 2 months, the commissioners and I have had public discussions regarding specific recommendations modifying the current draft of Realize Las Cruces. We ask that we can present these recommendations in a work session with City Council as soon as possible so that they might be incorporated into the next draft of Realize. Thank you for your consideration. Judy Berryman.
Thank you.
Mayor, Council, Councilor Graham, with all due respect, and I appreciate your honesty, but in my opinion, your comments earlier came across as arrogant and condescending. And in essence, they epitomize what we usually talk about as, we are the government, we know better, so shut up and take it. Thank you. Juan Garcia.
Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Parrott. What I have not heard the words said today was free enterprise. If a person wants to live next to a dispensary, let them. If a person wants to live in a suburban home with a yard, the view, let them. When any home is built, it will allow, when that home is sold, it will allow homeowners to move up the ladder or first-time buyers to get into their starter home because it will open up a home further down the line. So it doesn't have to be a certain type of housing built. Any housing built will help with the emergency. I was 17 years old, graduated from high school with a job before I graduated in Southwest Virginia in a town that didn't even have a McDonald's. I had a job at a law firm. I was married 2 weeks after graduation at 17, and we lived for 8 years in a 10 by 55 foot mobile home. And we stayed there for 8 years, and then we parlayed into a larger home, a double wide. Fast forward to my current husband. We started out in a home that's about the size, I'm guessing 750 square feet. He was an engineer with 18 years with Raytheon in Bristol, Tennessee. We parlayed and we saved and we worked hard. I worked until my son was born. I stayed home with him. And we worked hard and we saved. We moved 3 times in 4.5 years when we got to this point. We bought and sold by owner 3 homes. Property values and restrictions are extremely important. And now that we're in the retirement age, I don't feel that our hard work for our whole entire life should be threatened by the property values going down when things are, you sign a deed, that's what you expect to live until you sell. Thank you.
Good afternoon, City Manager, Mayor, Councilors. My name is Faith Hudson.
And I would just first like to say, Councilor Bencomo and Councilor Graham, I really appreciate what you had to say about affordable housing. Affordable housing is a crisis that we are dealing with nationwide as well as in a city. This requires us to think outside the box and all options that we might have. Affordable housing cannot just be big apartments, complexes. We need to look at all of our options, and that includes single-family dwellings, that includes 80 units, that includes mother-in-law apartments, carriage houses, all that kind of stuff. What I'm requesting out of you is to consider the importance of historic homes in this. And part of that is having a very strong Chapter 2 with clear language about the preservation of all of our cultural properties, which AKA would also be our historic homes. I served on the Historic Preservation Ad Hoc Committee, and the intent of Chapter 40 at the time was to protect all cultural properties, not just in historic districts and not just those that are called designated cultural properties. This is, in my opinion, dangerous language that needs to come out of Chapter 2. It should just say cultural properties. So part of that is preservation is affordable housing. It really is. It's not a dichotomy between the two. They need to be looked at synonymous because they can help solve the situation. That also means looking at ways that we can help owners that have properties that are run down. Abatement should not just be the first option on that. We don't have the luxury of abating houses in order to afford affordable housing. We need to look at infill. City owns a lot of empty lots themselves. What can be done with those? Encourage homeowners, give them incentives to help them fix it up so it can become affordable housing. And I will just reiterate one more thing. HPC needs to be at this table. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor, City Council. My name is Nicole Perez. I am the Executive Officer of the Las Cruces Home Builders. First and foremost, I want to say we are not here to oppose the Realize Las Cruces plan. We are just here to clarify some of the wording in there. I do want to thank my Government Affairs Committee for all the hard work that they have put into going line by line, especially John Moscato has spent several years just looking at the plans and just reviewing all of it, so a big thank you to them. I do want to reiterate that we are asking for a meeting just to, as a stakeholder meeting with the consultants and city staff, just so we can describe a little bit more of that packet that you guys did receive earlier. Thank you. Did Christina have any more of those that we could give to the consultant and Larry? Of those packets? Were we out? I just wanted to give one to the consultant so that way they could refer back to, if not, I can mail it.
No, we can make some copies.
Okay, thank
get
you.
it to 'em. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. Davin Lopez, with President and CEO of Mesilla Valley Economic Development Alliance. First of all, I want to just say I want to applaud the effort on trying to make the Development Code more flexible and usable. I personally like the idea of bringing more services closer to the neighborhood. In the nimble discussion, however, I've not heard really a discussion of nimbleness on economic-based development opportunities. And I'm specifically referring to the corridor around 70 all the way up going towards White Sands. What's missing there is really a complete lack of industrial space that might be available, light industrial space, that might be available to support the asset that we have of value, White Sands Missile Range and White Sands test facilities. Specifically, I'm referring to, on the grid, it's categories 123 and 124, light industrial fabrication and warehousing. Also, industrial printing is category number 100. 3D printing falls under industrial printing, and 3D printing is one of the fastest growing technology industries. We just lost a project to Texas. They were paying a minimum of $60,000 a year up to $120,000 a year. And then small data centers, as we see the change in that going forward, that is also excluded from this as well, another technology-driven industry. And all this comes down to, when we talk about limiting residential spaces, we're also now talking about limiting opportunities for higher wage job creation, especially on the east side of town. And I think you just take that into account in terms of this decision you're going to make, and hopefully we can have more conversation. The other thing is I was reading and I was hearing about a committee being formed, and then I read in the plan, new and unlisted uses. I'm not really sure exactly what that means, but it says it refers to the community development director making the final determination. I would just add, maybe you should bring an economic development voice into that, bring your economic development team into that discussion, so it's a balanced discussion on not only housing, but also the opportunities for job creation. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor, councilors, my name is Kerry Bolsterbaum. For the record, I'm a commercial real estate broker within this community for about 21 years. I've got a couple of, I'm just going to piggyback on what Davin was saying. If you look at that I-25 to Highway 70 corridor, you are almost eliminating under this plan almost 50 acres of industrial, light industrial zone land and pockets. And I can't stress enough that when you look at the highest producing revenue companies along this corridor, which is almost a 10-mile stretch, going out to where the city limits ends, the highest producing revenue companies are contractors that do business out at White Sands, construction companies that do business out at White Sands, and obviously we are seeing, for what I do anyway, more and more need for just general storage and light industrial needs up and down that corridor as the housing has grown and grown. And I'm not talking about intense industrial type stuff, I'm talking about organizations that need 50 to 75% office in scope, maybe some small shop for what they do, most of it being general storage, some discrete and logical opaque fencing and discretionary fencing, and it's almost like you're taking that away under this plan. It's almost like you're turning your back on companies that kind of put that area on the map and certainly support our biggest employers, and I don't think that's right. I just want to switch gears. As the housing's grown out there, we've seen more and more interest, basically just to meet the demand of that housing by especially convenience store operators, gasoline operators, and car wash operators and things like that. The next horizon, now that Sonoma 70 is growing out, seems to be at Mesa Grande and Highway 70. The one thing I just want to mention is that these companies are anytime you look at any corner that's ever had a life to it, whether it's Sonoma and 70, Rinconada and 70, Don Rosa University, anything that you're a fan of in this town, typically you got to crawl before you walk. I'm almost done, Mayor, I promise. You have to start with convenience store, light fuel services to start, and if those are successful, you typically get your light eateries, and then there's a domino effect for other retail that you might be a fan of, whether it's medical development, retail development, what have you. I just don't understand why that has to be a special use permit conversation when you look at the history of any major intersection, it kind of starts in that format. And you're creating barriers to entry by companies that are actively either closed on land in this area, looking to close on land in this area, and there's likely to go to Castle Rock, Colorado, Yuma, Arizona, or anywhere else in between if you're just creating those type of barriers. And I just hope you'll look at that corridor because it's a 10-mile stretch that you're looking to eliminate that, and I really think you got to relook at that. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, City Councilors and Mayor. I'm Sarah Smith. I want to say thank you to the Community Development Office, David Weir, and the consultants for lots of work on this. Greatly appreciated. To address Councilor Bencomo and Graham, I would really like you to look closely at the current code compared to even this new revision. There are still significantly more opportunities for apartments, for triplexes, duplexes in this new version that they just presented than there are in the existing code right now. So we have a situation where some people would like to live in an apartment area and some people want to live in a single family home area. My house, I have mobile homes on my street, I have HUD apartments really close to me, it doesn't bother me. But if some people would like to still have those zones, They should be allowed to have those zones. This new code, even as revised now, is still going to provide a lot more opportunities for apartments and triplexes and duplexes and some of these other housing types that you guys would like. So I think it's a really good compromise personally between what people are wanting, what you guys are trying to achieve for moving things forward in a way that can please everybody, hopefully. One other thing is the parking. I'd like to reiterate. There are some serious problems with the maximum parking caps that are built into the new revised code. As an example, a 3,000 square foot restaurant, which could have seating for 100 customers and 15 to 20 staff, would only be allowed to have 15 parking spaces with the way it's written in this code right now. Las Cruces has tried having a maximum parking cap before. They got rid of it because it didn't work right. It limits the businesses. I know this is a place where there's common ground. I've heard people on both sides saying they really want to get rid of the maximum cap, so I would hope you guys will please remove the maximum parking cap, leave it up to the businesses so they can decide. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
My name is George Pearson. I was a member of the TAC, but not speaking on behalf of the TAC, and I'm also Vice President of Cruces, the local bicycle and pedestrian advisory organization. Realize Las Cruces is an important update to our zoning code. Its intent is to create a more flexible environment to promote additional housing units and safe travel for all modes of transportation, including bicyclists and pedestrians. Car ownership costs in the area of $10,000 a year. With affordable housing in the infill area and proper bike ped facilities, a family could change from a two-vehicle family to a one-vehicle family and be able to put that $10,000 in their pocket. But this won't happen if there are not safe bicycle facilities. This includes safe and secure bicycle parking at destinations, for example, grocery stores. Right now, safe and secure bike parking does not exist at most grocery stores. Current and the Realize Las Cruces update only requires bike parking for new construction. However, parking lots are overbuilt. Increasing bicycle mode share is a solution to multiple problems, including traffic congestion and added health benefits and economic prosperity. So please require bike parking for existing properties. You can have reasonable limits. Maybe properties that currently have 15 parking spots would be the minimum to require bike parking. And you can phase in the requirement over a certain number of years instead of requiring it immediately. So please consider this change. This was talked about at the TAC. There was no pushback at the TAC, so I was kind of disappointed this didn't appear in the draft. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors. It's nice to see everybody here today. A couple things stood out for me today. First, the wide public...
If you can state your name.
Oh, I need to... Oh, Donald Wilson. Sorry about that. I'm the current president of Cruces. It strikes me today that there are some common themes that this Realize Las Cruces effort is hoping to bring about. When I look on the website for the city of Las Cruces, it talks about wanting to be an inclusive community, having a vibrant quality of life, enhancing our livability, and having a socially sustainable, and doing all this in a socially sustainable manner. So this is a great opportunity, the updating of this code. If we're only going to do it every 20 years, we have to be sure we do it right when we do it. So I think the thing that I'm struck with today is, given how many people are interested in this, it probably makes sense to take a step back and get some more input from people rather than moving forward with the plan. I think the idea of meeting with the Home Builders Association, and when I worked in business and when government was going to regulate me, I always wanted to be at the table. Even if I didn't like the end result, I felt like I had the opportunity for input. So I would encourage the council to think about that. Two other thoughts that I had in listening to all this. Walkability is important. for all of our citizens. Roadway design standards are very important. Councilor Matisse talked about equity. I'd like the council to consider equity in a different context, which is to make the roadways and the spaces accessible to all Las Cruces. And finally, I want to reiterate my pitch for this city council to adopt a Vision Zero approach that will take us, into 20 years from now and 30 years from now, so that eventually we'll have a city where all users of the roads, pedestrians, bicyclists, and drivers can do so safely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't have to lower the mic often. What a privilege. I'm Susan Greenwald Cabello, Executive Director of Downtown Las Cruces Partnership. I'd like to echo the comments of our board chair, John Munoz. We're really excited about the possibilities of Realize Las Cruces in the development code. The very old numbers are that there's about 6,000 people that live and work within a 1 mile radius of downtown. That's a 2000, probably 16 number. So I would say that's probably 20 to 30% higher now. So what we want to provide people is a place that they can live and work downtown where they're not driving as much, that it's walkable. I was showing our interns our district, and I said that we really want to make it walkable. And Kylie, our genius intern, said, well, technically any distance is walkable. And I was like, too smart for me. Fair enough. I sent them out this morning. They came back. They were red. They were hot. They were sweaty. It's just a big area. And there's some areas that aren't safe for pedestrians. If you cross Compo, you're taking your life into your own hands downtown. So really want to emphasize, I know Compo redesign is in the work, but making this a walkable area. I was so excited when I saw the parking lot with the green space. Really want to kind of avert some of those effects of us being a heat desert downtown. We love the plaza, but it's concrete, and it kind of makes things hotter. Also really excited about the possibility of mixed use development downtown. So commercial space on the bottom, maybe some residential on top. Guys, we are in the fantastically awful place of running out of space for retail downtown. So all this exciting. Thank you for your consideration. So really excited about making all of Las Cruces more walkable for our citizens. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is Jody Crowley. I'm a member of AARP Las Cruces. I was asked to come and give a little presentation. I have a letter that I can give to the clerk from our Executive Director, Dr. Sanchez. The City of Las Cruces is a designated member of AARP's network of age-friendly states and communities, and is well-positioned to support housing that will offer walkability options, being close to schools, amenities, jobs, et cetera. In particular, we hope that Las Cruces will consider policies that encourage the development of missing middle housing, particularly ADUs, or accessory dwelling units. An accessory dwelling unit is an independent housing unit built on an existing home site. It could be an independent building. It could be an apartment within a building. What it allows is for seniors to age in place. You can build an ADU that is completely accessible for a senior who's getting some mobility issues. You can have multi-generational housing so that an adult child can be living in that, or a traditional granny flat where an older person moves in with an adult, but in a more independent way. Okay. Seniors are a rapidly growing segment of the population, especially in New Mexico. We are predicted to have the third largest percentage of seniors by like 2050 or something. Land use regulations that facilitate ADUs and other middle-level housing will permit the housing needs, will prepare the community for the housing needs created by demographic change. I encourage the city to address those needs as they develop their codes. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine. Is that everyone? Okay, well, thank you all for your comments. Before we finish, I just want to acknowledge those that were on the TAC committee. If you were on the TAC committee, could you please stand up? We want to recognize you and say thank you for all the work that you did. I think Mr. Moscato. Thank you. Anything else from council? Good. All right. Well, I think that kind of answers, as far as the open house event. Maybe look at having some meetings with the associations that requested the invites, and maybe coordinate with staff and get those meetings done. And then I know, like I said, Mr. Cedillos had mentioned that the TIA meetings are going on in progress as well. And then when that open house comes up, then maybe then we can have all those issues addressed. I hope that helped, the comments and everything else.
Yes, that was very helpful. Thanks to everyone who shared their comments. I wanted to make a suggestion here at the end.
Before that does clarify that instead of scheduling a date on the open house, pushing it back, as maybe you saw planned, to get some input from the other associations in those private meetings first.
Yes, my
Okay.
suggestion was here on number 2, where we say conduct the open house event and revisit with code users for feedback. Please switch those. And so instead of doing that at the same time as the open house, we could meet with the code users. That would include the Home Builders Association, et cetera. So we could do that ahead of the open house instead of at the same time.
Yes, that would be fine.
Okay.
I think that would be good.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, again, as it was mentioned earlier, it's been 20 years, right? So I don't think we have to just check the box, as Mr. Wilson was saying. We don't need to just check the box and say we fulfilled it. This is an opportunity. This is exciting. This is good for Las Cruces, and we want to do it right, and we want to do a good job. So thank you all for your input. We really appreciate it. Thanks. Next is item 3.3, GeoBond quarterly update. Mr. David Cedillo. You don't want to tell them to sit down and watch your presentation?
I'll watch it. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. David Cedillo, Public Works Director, for the record. Both myself and Ms. Natalie Green will be going over this quarterly update for the 2022 general obligation bond projects. If you recall, there was 4 questions approved by the public. That was for a new fire station number 9, the continuation of the East Mesa Public Rec Complex, affordable housing, and park improvements. For fire station number 9, the construction documents have been completed. We're at 100%, and currently the project is out to bid. Once the bidding is completed within 2 weeks, we will go into those negotiations, and we're estimating starting construction about mid-September. If you see the construction schedule down below, it does show that we are on track to having the facility built by the end of quarter number 4 in 2025. For the continuation of the East Mesa Public Rec Complex and those funds, the remaining portions of Phase 1 that this money used is substantially complete. Contractor is working on the punch list. A couple of those items that we're still lacking on there is the shade structures throughout and the playground equipment, both coming in at the end of July and the end of August. For the continuation of the new portions of the facility, design has just completed the 60%, and we're anticipating having the 90% by the end of July. As part of those improvements to the continuation, mentioned to you at the last meeting, those does include 8 sand volleyball courts, 2 basketball courts, concession building, and a restroom at the 10-acre park. If you look to the photo on the right, that does depict the locations of those improvements within the complex. Here we have the schedules for all of these projects. As I mentioned before, the remaining work in phase 1 is substantially complete. We're working on the closeout for that. The Musco lighting, I did report at the last quarterly meeting that that was completed back then. And you have the schedule for the continuation of those other improvements that we just went over, the sand volleyball court, basketball, the concession, and the restrooms. For the park improvements, for La Llorona Park, those construction documents have also been completed and are at 100%. At the last update, we mentioned that the International Boundary Water Commission wanted to review the 100% construction drawings for the issuance of the permits, but also to lease the amendment on which La Llorona Park is sitting on. As part of our next steps also, we will be moving on to the bidding process here in August. And as previously mentioned, if there are any funds left over from the improvement of La Llorona Park, those remaining funds will be shifted over to Telbrook to replace any exercise equipment at that park. And with that, I'll turn it over now to Ms. Natalie Green. Sorry. After this one, she let me know that I have to update you on the schedule. If you can see below, we are moving through our schedule, a little bit behind schedule. However, we are on track to have the construction done by quarter number 4 of 2025. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Natalie Green for the record. The third question was $6 million for affordable housing. Our projects are well underway. So Three Sisters is under construction. They're moving pretty quickly on that one. We have vertical construction that's gone up, and I have a few photos to show you. The Padrina Senior Apartments has also started construction, and so they've started framing some of the outbuildings, and they are pouring most of the foundations in the next couple weeks. The Peachtree Canyon Apartments Phase 1 has closed at the New Mexico Mortgage Finance Authority. It will be coming to council for final approval of all the loan and mortgage documents, and then we'll close on the entire financing package shortly thereafter. Our hope is the second week of September, and then we'll have groundbreaking and construction to follow shortly. Our land acquisition, we did receive our first appraisal. We are soliciting the second appraisal. The cost did come back substantially higher than we had anticipated, so staff is just trying to come to terms that housing costs more and construction costs more. And then we'll bring that purchase agreement to council. Revolving loan funds, the 3 single-family homes are near completion. We were hoping they would be done this week, but we think it's going to be next week, and so we are planning mid-July a ribbon cutting of all 10 houses, not just the pilot program houses, but we also have some that were funded with home investment partnerships, and so we'll do a big ribbon cutting for all 10 houses on Bolero Court. We are well underway with pre-development for Amador Crossing. We anticipate that the 75% completion documents will be done by the end of July, and then we are sending those to a third-party cost estimator, so we'll have final costs on the construction for Amador Crossing. These are pictures of Three Sisters. We did a drive-by today, so it's actually more advanced than this. They now have windows, and they've framed building number 3 and are starting to frame building number 2. And then this is the community building. Padrina also started construction, and again, they've now started to frame the outbuildings. On yours? I'll turn this one over to David.
Thank you. This you've seen before, Mayor and Council. Again, it's just a representation of the costs for each of the projects as we go through. Once we get into construction, we will be reporting back on those expenditures as they come forward on our next quarterly reports. And with that, both Natalie and I will stand for any questions council may have.
None? No? Well, I have a question. Won't let him off the hook that quick. No, it's just, as I recall, we had a consultant as a project manager in the previous GO bond, and now you as Public Works, you guys are fulfilling that obligation as the lead project managers, correct?
Mayor, Council, that is correct.
Okay.
We are trying to maximize the funding to be able to do more improvements on these projects as they're more advanced.
Okay. So my question, how's it going?
It's going well.
Okay. Thank you, David. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think that's it. That's the last one on the item, on the agenda. So thank you all. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Graham.
Second, Bencomo.
This is on the motion to adjourn the work session. Counselor McClure?
Yes.
Counselor Matisse?
Yes.
Counselor Graham?
Yes.
Counselor Cram?
Yes.
Counselor Flores?
Yes.
Counselor Bencomo?
Yes.
And Mayor?
Yes.